There are some things that Americans are just tired of hearing in a business setting. These are cliche idioms or expressions that, depending on what kind of work environment you're in, will depend on whether or not you should say them.
We have a lot to unpack here culturally and in the business context, so let's do it. What's up, guys? Welcome to Wide World Friends English. Today, we are talking about several different idioms here. These are things that we just hear over and over and over and over again, and there either needs to be a stop or it's something that's still acceptable. America's a big place. It's a very varied place. There are lots of different peoples and cultures, and our business world is just as varied. So we are doing this video on things that are super cliche and we're tired of seeing, but at the same time, in some business contexts, these are still okay. If you are coming to work here, or you are working here, or you're a customer service representative, or whatever, these are some things that you can change in your writing to just elevate your writing and sound a bit different than everybody else.
So the first one, and probably my biggest pet peeve personally, is when a person says giving 110% or giving 100%. I love math, and that mathematically doesn't make any sense. And that's the whole point, right? It's supposed to be exaggerated. It's supposed to say, try the best of your best of the best. And I get it, but it's wrong.
I think it's being used to kind of like inspire people to do even more than they can do. And I think because of that, it makes it kind of annoying. It's so easy to say. If you listen to American podcasts, you know that we say this term a lot in speaking. So when it starts to creep into writing, and writing is supposed to be far more precise in English than speaking is, so especially in business writing, it's just inaccurate and it doesn't inspire anybody. You lose the tone of voice that comes with exaggerating when you say, I'm giving 110%. You lose that voice. So it just looks imprecise.
Another thing that some people slip into their business writing is at the end of the day. And that's not bad, except that it's really not precise. Does that mean at the end of the workday? Does it mean at the end of the day? Does that mean like the end of the 14th or something like that? What does it mean when you say at the end of the day?
Some people are able to approach this and say, you're my boss. So when you say at the end of the day, it means at the end of the workday, because you have no business in what I do at the end of my physical day, right? Other people that are more people pleasers, when they see end of the day or EOD or something like that, they're thinking, oh my goodness, that's before midnight. I have to get this done before midnight, and they'll work after hours. One of the things you need to kind of keep straight here is you need to figure out what they mean when they say this. But also it's one of those things that if you are giving a promise and say, yes, I'll have this to you at the end of the day, you need to be more precise in saying, do you mean at the end of the workday? Do you mean at the end of that person's workday? Because if they get off at 4 and you get off at 5, that's a big difference. But you can also say, do you mean I'm going to work after hours? I'm going to work overtime to make sure this gets to you before midnight. What do you mean? So be more precise.
One that I actually personally haven't heard a ton is to get granular, meaning let's focus down on some details and get them hammered out so that we can progress further.
I've heard this a lot more, but I'm in more business context historically. For me, when I hear this, I hear it over and over and over again. It's just a broken thing that a lot of people say. It means getting into the nitty gritty. That's kind of the idea here. It's like, let's get down and do this at the base level. Get granular is in some contexts, but it's not in others. Like for Josh, he did not know what this meant when he first heard it. I know it because I hear it a lot more in the context that I'm involved in. He had no idea. He was like, what does that mean? Like grain size? He can kind of get that. This is one of the things you have to be careful with. Some people know this term and some people don't. And so if you start writing with this in business emails, what does that mean? And it also kind of sets off this whole other thing. If you're very formal and then you use something like get granular, which is kind of informal, now we're confused in formality and it can come across very confusingly without your voice actually there behind it.
I have heard the next one, which is synergize, which means just to work together, to cooperate, to collaborate. But synergize has this idea, this informal feeling that we're all going to kind of team together. It's going to be this great energy that's going to be just great and beautiful and amazing. That's why it's more informal. That's why it's a kind of a strange thing to use in business terms. If you're messaging a person that you're wanting to collaborate with and you're like, hey, I'm so grateful for the synergy, or let's synergize on this project. It gives kind of a weird feeling, especially if that person has a more traditional business mindset.
Which some people are fine with it. Again, these are different. The business realm in America is so different. You have people that speak very informally at work, and you have teams that just run off of this, synergize and get granular and all this stuff. Good vibes. They run off of all of that lingo. But over here, where we are in the American South, we don't speak like that. So if you're in a business in Houston, you are not likely to hear this lingo. If you are working in Atlanta, you're probably not going to hear this as much. It exists. People are extremely varied, but it's not something that we use that much. And so it could be misunderstood very easily, and you don't want to come across as irresponsible because you're not thinking about communication on both sides. Communication is not just about what you mean going to somebody else. It's what you mean and that person understands. And there's got to be a two-way street here. So avoid terms like this unless you happen to be in a work context where everybody is using it. That's okay.
The next one is no-brainer.
It's very overused.
It's a no-brainer. Like, obviously we should choose that person, or obviously we should choose to build there. It's a no-brainer.
What does that mean? When you're speaking, we can get into that. We can flesh that out. We can ask our questions. But in an email situation, and especially a business report, you definitely don't want to do this. In an email situation, why is it a no-brainer? What you're saying in speech when you say it's a no-brainer is you're saying, I'm not even going to spend time on the details because this is so obvious to all of us in the room. If you send that in an email to everybody, it better be crystal clear and be based on things that you've talked about before in person, because if those details are not clear, you might be saying that it's a no-brainer, but for them, they might not understand why it's a no-brainer. For them, they might see lots of problems with this. They might not accept that approach. So you got to be very particular with how you use this term.
It's basically assuming. An assumption is not necessarily a great thing to make. And so when you are saying this is a no-brainer in a business email or in a memo, Amber's right. You better be very confident.
Otherwise, it can come across as rude or, just like you said, very assuming.
The next one is bandwidth. This is an internet term. Informally, we mean not enough energy, not enough brain space, not enough mental capacity. You're overloaded already. You are waist deep in a report and somebody comes up to you and says, hey, can you do this for me? You could say, man, I don't have enough bandwidth for that right now. Like all of these, that could be an acceptable term to use in speaking, but in writing, it just seems, again, not very clear, not very precise. It sounds like you're assuming that you know exactly how much work that's going to take. And so you say, I don't have enough time to do that.
It also sounds like you're just irresponsible. If you imagine seeing this without any voice, you don't see their face, you don't know them very well if it's a teammate you don't know, and they send you an email back saying, sorry, I can't take that on right now. I don't have enough bandwidth for that. It sounds like you're shirking responsibility is what it sounds like. And that's what it comes across as. It makes you sound like you're much younger than maybe you are. And it sounds like you're just trying to say, no, just no, because that's essentially what you're saying. But you want to have the body language to back that up. You want to have your face there. You want to have your tone of voice, and you want to be able to explain. It's not that I don't want to. It's I'm not able to take that on whilst doing this. You need to be able to explain yourself. If you go and you say this in a business email, especially to like a larger group, it's probably going to drop respect for you pretty quickly.
I already said the next one, which is brain space. It's same idea. You have only so much mental capacity, and you say, I don't have enough brain space for that. What you're doing in both of these, you're giving an excuse, really, but you are not giving a reason why you have that excuse. Yeah. So if you send that email, you're basically passing off the responsibility, saying, sure, I would love to do that, but I can't because of reasons I'm not going to tell you.
You are saying that you're overwhelmed. And in some business context, this is acceptable, this is allowed. In other business contexts, especially more traditional ones, this is what you were hired to do. And so if you say, sorry, I don't have brain space for that, it's very rude. And you're saying basically, I'm sorry, I don't have the mental capacity to do my job. So that's one of those things you have to kind of pay attention to. Again, in some business contexts, this is acceptable, this is allowed. But in writing, this is really easy to misconstrue or to misinterpret.
The eighth and final cliche that we're going to talk about today is game changer. And this is kind of, again, like we've been saying for the rest of these, it's imprecise, it's assuming, it's supposed to be punchy, it's supposed to be powerful. But in the end, if it's overused, it seems cliche.
In business, we have a ton of idioms and phrases that are inspired by sports, especially baseball, for whatever reason. It's from mid-20th century terminology. Baby boomers use this a lot. Since millennials have now overtaken baby boomers in the workplace in America, we are using these terms less. They just come across as very cliche, very overused, very, please be more precise. But at the same time, some business cultures allow this. So this is the thing that we want you to take away from this video. These things, inherently, we don't use these in business communication. We do not use these when we're talking to customers for either of our businesses. We don't. We stay away from them because they're imprecise, they're overused, they communicate things. They're very easy to interpret in a way that could be offensive, or it can lower your reputation or respect for you. So we avoid these, but also we recognize that we're part of a region that doesn't use these as much. So one of the things that you need to be doing and what you need to walk away with in this video is you need to listen to your boss and your team and your coworkers, and you need to pay attention to the emails that are sent, the text messages that are sent, the memos, all of that. You need to pay attention to the language. Odds are you're going to have bulletins, you're going to have announcements and things that are not in this language. And if somebody asks you for a report from your job, what you report should not be using these terms. Unless, again, it's part of the business context, but it's not that common to use stuff like this in a business context. So if you coming in as an ESL speaker, you don't want to sound like Mr. Beast when you walk in the door and you are sending emails. You don't want to sound like a kid coming in. You don't want to necessarily sound like in your writing, you don't want to sound unprofessional.
It's always easier to start from formality and then go down into informality than the other way around. You start off sounding like a kid and then you try to sound like an adult. It can be more difficult. Personally, this is an issue that I often face because I often text or message people in my life in a way that I speak. And like we've been saying, the spoken voice doesn't come across in the writing. It may be okay for me to talk to my friend and say, well, that was a no-brainer, but in text, that voice does not come across. And so that's the thing that you need to be careful of. You need to be careful of the context. You need to be careful of spoken voice and how that doesn't translate into writing in general. And really, you just need to keep your eyes open for what is acceptable in your workplace.
All right, guys, that's it for us today, guys. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.